Hello and welcome to the Personal Development School YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to cover the X files of the dismissive avoidant, particularly how dismissive avoidant attachment styles tend to navigate their breakups. And at the end, we're going to cover how they tend to navigate their rebounds after a breakup takes place. If you're not already familiar, you should definitely stick till the end because if you're not sure of how a DA tends to navigate the rebound relationships, I think the last piece of content here might really surprise you. If you're not familiar with the PDS YouTube channel in general, my name is Gibson. Welcome. I am a counselor, author, and founder of the Personal Development School. And here we tend to create daily YouTube videos all about integrated attachment theory, the subconscious mind, and how to thrive in relationships if you didn't really have healthy modeling for relationships growing up. So, first and foremost, dismissive avoidant attachment styles tend to express very specific behavioral patterns when it comes to how they treat their exes. It's really important to note that dismissive avoidant attachment styles can, of course, have a whole array of different behaviors. They can definitely, depending on the length of the relationship and depending on how in depth that relationship was, have slight variations to this. But we're going to cover the core things that we tend to see as the most strongly emerging patterns. So, first and foremost, it's very common for dismissive avoidants right after they go through a breakup to detach fast. It is very common to see that dismissive avoidant attachment styles, after they actually go through a breakup, will do things like just stop responding to their ex altogether. Maybe even if their ex has to pick up stuff that's left at their home, the dismissive avoidant can really go into this stonewalling mode. Part of the reason for this first piece of how they navigate breakups of emotional detachment is that dismissive avoidance as a coping mechanism in general try to minimize their attachment needs when in relationships to others as a means of self-protection. So they essentially try to convince themselves at a subconscious level that they are not interested, don't need anybody, better off without the person. And they can really repress any kind of emotional connection or intimate connection they felt to their partner right after a breakup. So, just to give context here, I've heard stories like, everything seems to be going well, one partner and the dismissive avoidant get into a fight, they decide to break up kind of in the spur of the moment, and the dismissive avoidant literally never sends a text message ever again or just walks away and doesn't even try to reconnect in any form. And maybe the ex says like, hey, should we hash things out and have closure, or hey, can I pick up my stuff from your home? And the dismissive avoidant just like does not respond. So they're really good at like icing out. And again, this is part of their coping mechanism for how they've evolved and adapted throughout childhood. Because if they come from an upbringing where there's a lot of emotional neglect, then what that essentially translates to is if there's a lot of emotional neglect, they can't want emotional connection from their caregivers as children. And so by denying that need for connection to themselves first, it gives them a sense of relief. So they've learned to do this all the way from childhood. And so they're quite effective at it. The second major strategy we'll see is they tend to go through this emotional repression mode. And I've often found that dismissive avoidance, when it comes to navigating a breakup, will go through this ability to repress how they actually feel about the situation for quite long periods of time. So we'll see generally, just to compare it for juxtaposition's sake, you might see an anxious preoccupied as an example, really go through a lot of feels after a breakup, right? They might really be sad, devastated, upset, lots of tears, lots of, expressing how they feel in the first couple of weeks. But because they get a lot of that out faster and earlier, they actually sort of have this peak of a lot of suffering and pain. And then it starts to sort of be on like the downturn of all that suffering and pain. It doesn't mean it doesn't go away because of course, anxious preoccupieds can be very hurt after a breakup, but the peak is usually in the first 2 weeks and then it gets slowly but surely easier. Fearful avoidance, they tend to repress their emotions for, around the first 4 weeks as a general rule, give or take, depending on which way they lean. If they have a strong DA side or a more strong anxious side. So you'll see that they tend to repress for that period of time. Dismissive avoidance can repress from like the 6 week mark. And when I say the 6 week mark, this is when like the earliest time that they'll start kind of letting their feelings in. The 6 week mark to sometimes the 3 month mark, depending on how avoidant they really are. So they go through this strong emotional repression phase as a subconscious strategy, essentially, to be able to not have to feel their feelings when, feeling their feelings scares them. It makes them feel shameful or defective for having feelings. It makes them feel weak. They don't like to feel vulnerable. So all of these things they don't want to feel, they try to push down. We'll see as a third piece. So we've got the strong emotional detachment. We have the strong emotional repression. Number three, we tend to see a lot of um, this dynamic where dismissive avoidance will focus a lot on their independence and freedom. So they are pretty good early on at putting emphasis on like all of my freedom I now have, the freedom from responsibility, the freedom to do my own thing, the, ability to go have my independence and autonomy. And they'll tend to be okay for the first like 6 weeks to 2 months, 3 months at just focusing on that. But they have this kind of like boomerang effect in relationships where after they've gotten out of them, I find that they actually tend to really hurt over breakups, especially if it was a longer term relationship later on and sometimes for longer. And I think this is because dismissive avoidance, they don't just get emotional and physical needs met from relationships. They also get a lot of security and comfort from relationships. So if this was a longer term relationship where you're more likely to sort of extract security and comfort from that relationship, then what's going to end up happening as more time passes is you are going to feel a greater sense of relief. If you were not a dismissive avoidant, but for a dismissive avoidant, because they do get so much security and comfort, they're actually going to feel a greater sense of suffering longer after the fact because they're not having that security and comfort from having a partner around. So this tends to be, again, another thing that separates out dismissive avoidance from our typical, like, securely attached person, anxious, preoccupied, even fearful avoidance. Number four pattern we'll see for how they tend to navigate relationships is they will do a lot of creature comfort seeking. This is their way of self soothing. And when we talk about dismissive avoidance post breakup, we'll see that dismissive avoidants really push into their creature comforts more. Now, self soothing for a dismissive avoidant isn't actual self soothing, especially after a breakup. In fact, actual self soothing would be things that nourish us, right? So, like, let's say, for example, let's pretend I go through a breakup, I might do things that would really nourish me. So I would make time for family and friends. I would make time for journaling, for meditation, for processing my feelings. I would make time for exercise, for health, for actually trying to really nourish myself through pain and suffering. Whereas a dismissive avoidant, their self soothing won't actually be self nourishing soothing or self compassionate soothing. It will be self soothing through numbing their feelings, repressing their feelings. So this could be engaging in like using alcohol or substances or binging on video games or television or food, all these things that are meant to like distract themselves from feeling. So rather than processing, it's just a covering up, it's a numbing, it's a suppression again by proxy, essentially. So the more that we have this dynamic of these creature comfort seeking behaviors, the more the dismissive avoidant may feel like short term gratification or short term relief, but this won't necessarily be how they feel better long term. And we'll often see that dismissive avoidance, when it comes to their exes, will sometimes think quite negatively of their exes, focus on their exes' flaws and pain points and reasons why. This is number five here, by the way. Reasons why the relationship wouldn't work out, all the things their ex did wrong. Like they'll almost flaw find again as this strategy to minimize any kind of pain that their ex could cause them. And again, they'll do that really strongly for the first 6 weeks, up to 2, 3 months. And then we'll sometimes see this kind of boomerang effect where they start missing that security and comfort. Now, as we go into the second part of this video, we're going to talk about how DAs tend to treat rebound relationships. Are they likely to get into them? Well, what I've often seen when it comes to a dismissive avoidant with their ex is um, they may rebound if they feel like it is a distraction from the pain or suffering. I usually find in the first 6 weeks to 3 months, dismissive avoidance may not rebound. And in fact, they'll tend to focus on their freedom, independence. They may date, they may talk to people, they may flirt, they may go on a date here or there, but like actually have a rebound relationship where they commit to something is quite unlikely. However, I have seen it in very few cases. And the path that actually tends to take for when this does happen is that this tends to happen specifically when a dismissive avoidant has been coming out of a very or a long-term relationship. And coming out of this very long-term relationship, it's almost like they're afraid to lose that sense of security and comfort. So they may reinvest in a new partner earlier on. But again, I usually won't see that until after that 6 week to 3 month mark because dismissive avoidance in that first 6 weeks to 3 months are really repressing their feelings and they're focusing on themselves and really kind of like they're more focusing on how to better avoid themselves and actually how to nourish themselves. But there's still this like self-oriented focus rather than being others oriented in their focus. And we'll see for sure that if DAs do engage in rebound relationships, they will tend to want to rebound with people who are also quite independent, who have some degree of emotional distance, who have low expectations of them, who bring a sense of security and comfort without expectation, who tend to be more accepting of them really early, and who don't demand a lot of vulnerability. And then what we'll often see as well here in terms of the rebound relationship is that the rebound relationships can be very short lived for the vast majority of relationship dynamics. However, I would say, and this is the surprising piece you've hopefully been waiting for, I would say that dismissive avoidant attachment styles, if they are coming out of very long term relationships, in about 10% of cases, I have seen dismissive avoidant attachment styles actually rebound in a long term relationship after a long term relationship. And again, I believe this goes hand in hand with the fact that the DA doesn't want to feel that feeling of disconnection and abandonment and the lack of security and comfort. And so they may actually reinvest in a very committed relationship after being in a really committed relationship as a subconscious coping mechanism or strategy. Again, if they do this, it will usually be because the person has low expectations, really like looks out for their independence, has a degree of emotional distance from them, tends to be more accepting, these sorts of things. But it can be this subconscious strategy to avoid processing their feelings from the past commitment and to avoid really feeling too much about it by having this kind of overlaid distraction for something new to invest in going forward. So, if you are a dismissive avoidant or you are the loved one of a dismissive avoidant and you are looking to do a deep dive into how to heal from a breakup, I actually have a whole how to heal from a breakup course that you can check out for free for 7 days. The goal of this course is that if you complete it within the 7 day period, you will take at least 40% out of the sting of the pain and the suffering of post breakup right away. The reason being that this course is designed to help you identify exactly what you were missing from your ex through needs, through traits, and then find healthy strategies to integrate these things into the relationship to yourself. Because when we're suffering, we are suffering over the void of that person being in our lives. It's not their physical body we're missing, it's literally the needs they brought into our lives and the traits they brought out in us, or the traits they represented that maybe we were repressing. So the course helps to really lay this out, dig into that, have healthy strategies and action steps you can take to identify those things and then move towards healing that void. And we shake out all of the stories from a painful breakup, all of the times that you told yourself you weren't good enough, it was all your fault, all that kind of stuff. We really work through those in a fast acting way. So it's designed to help if you're feeling like so much suffering, it takes that really strong edge off very quickly within that 7 day period, and then gives you a healthy roadmap for how to pick up sort of the rest of the pieces and continue building that fast momentum to healing. So if you want to check that out, you can using our 7 day link down below. We also have a lifetime membership that's going on right now, $1,000 off of our lifetime membership, which gives you access to all courses at PDS for life, as well as all of our live events, webinars, all the daily things we have. So again, you can check that all out down below if you want to join me on the other side in a more interactive course format. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos, and I will see you in the next one.